And welcome back to Music Free Static. The second season of Andor is done. It is fabulous. Let's talk about it with spoilers. So let's get into it. Yes, the second season and a final season of Andor is done. And we'll talk about that in a little bit as we go along. But this was amazing. Okay. Now, the first season one was terrific. Okay, the writing was excellent, the acting was excellent, and I just didn't enjoy it. Okay, not to say it was bad in any way, shape, or form. It just wasn't fun. Okay, it's one of those things. It was good if I'm in the mood for something really deep and intense and stuff. Yeah, Andor fits that bill beautifully, but it wasn't fun. Season 2, on the other hand, seemed to remember that it was actually Star Wars. And that Star Wars can be serious, but still be fun. And sometimes the fun wasn't in characters popping jokes and things like that. Remember, The Empire Strikes Back probably has more jokes than the other two movies in the original trilogy, but no one thinks it's not the least or it's not the most serious of the three of the original movies. That I think I got that right. It's the most serious, but it's also the funniest. So, Star Wars can do that. And a lot of the scenes, there's some intense stuff going on, but hey, we've got aliens in the background, and we've got other weird stuff. It's like, hey, yes, this is a Star Wars. We are in Star Wars, and it's okay to be in Star Wars while tackling these very, very serious topics. Okay? All right, so I'll tell you, season 2, definitely superior to season 1 for me in the, hey, I'd watch again category. In fact, a lot of these, so this season was structured in 3-episode arcs. So they had 1 3-episode arc for each year leading up to Rogue One and A New Hope, okay? Which was interesting. The original plan was to have a full season for each year. For budgetary reasons, I think that got slashed, okay? Which is unfortunate, I think, as we go on, because I think there are I think we end up missing some context and some storytelling that hurts some of the arcs a little bit. But I'll tell you, I went back and rewatched that third arc again as soon as I could. As soon as I had time, I sat down and rewatched that third arc because it was so amazing. It was serious and intense, and there was action it was just, oh, I loved it. So freaking good. And basically those 2 middle arcs, man, were amazing. So good. Okay. And I never felt any of that in season 1, right? I was like, I always felt like I was enduring Star Wars, and I love Star Wars, but it felt like I was enduring those episodes rather than enjoying them. But dang, that third arc. So the whole series has been building up to the Gorman massacre. Okay. This is something that's been talked about in Star Wars canon for a long time. This is what prompted Mon Mothma to give an impassioned speech in the Senate and then forced her out. Okay. And it's been talked about a few times. We see it in Star Wars Rebels. And there's some interesting canon weirdness that happens between Rebels and Andor because Tony Gilroy decided not to be bound by what happened over in that cartoon over there. Though, not so much that I think it causes problems. I think there's a good link there. But the idea is you've got the beginning of, hey, the Empire needs this material in Gorman. And we find out it is for Orson Krennic, Director Krennic's energy project, right? What is his energy project? It's the freaking Death Star, okay? He needs this material for something. I forgot what they said, lens coatings and other things, okay? And Gorman is the place to get it, okay? Wonderful. Well, for the Empire, not so much for the Gore who live on Gorman. And so you start to see this buildup of the Empire through a suggestion from Dedra Miro to say, hey, we're going to plant an insurgency on Gorman. And that will justify the Empire moving in and taking over. Okay. And Krennic buys into that, and we're off to the races. It's a really slow race. It's like a snail race, but it's a race anyway. Then you move into the second arc as the Gorman front starts to, it takes its first steps, prompted by Cyril, who is now placed sort of as an undercover operative of the ISB. He's been transferred to basically logistics on Gorman, but he's acting as a spy. It's like a double agent. He's working for the Empire, feeding information to the Gorman so that they can then blow up and justify the Empire moving in. Okay. Very cool how that all works out. And then that leads to some interesting complications, right? Cassian gets sent in to check on the situation. He thinks they're not ready to do anything. Luthen doesn't care. He sends in the second team, and oh yeah, they definitely get the Gorman to do the things, and they hijack a convoy of weapons, and unfortunately some deaths happen, which isn't great, but especially because the death was so unnecessary. And now as I'm looking at this, I'm blanking on her name, but both of them for some reason. But they get in an operation where there was no reason for anybody to get hurt. Yeah, it kills oh man, why am I blanking on her name? Anyway, it kills one of Luthen's operatives. It's like, what the hey, man? There's no way. And the speech that's given at the end about that is great. Okay. But this is all set up because once you get into the third arc, holy cow, we are off as this shows the Gorman Massacre, which originally in Legends, the Gorman Massacre was Grand Moff Tarkin landing his cruiser on 500 Gorman. Well, it turns out that happened, but that wasn't the massacre. That was just a precursor. That was just a warm-up, okay? And realized, oh no, this is going to get bad. And it gets bad. And so that the whole build-up in the second episode of that arc is the massacre. It's the Empire pulls the people into the town square that they've been denied, where the memorial of that Tarkin's crushing of the people. But it pulls them in, and then they instigate a riot, which then, of course, leads to lots of death. Okay. Also, there's a fun scene where Cyril, who has realized that everything he's been doing is not great, right? He sees the horror that he has been a part of unleashing upon these people. And it's just, he's walking through the crowd just sort of dumbfounded. Right up until he sees Cassian. Right? Because remember, the first season was Cyril Karn's whole drive to catch Cassian because he ruined his life. He finally sees him, and they go at it, and Cassian has no idea who this guy is. I need to. I have watched season 1 a couple of times. I don't know that Andor and Cyril actually ever met. Cyril knew who he was because he was the officer who was investigating the murder of the two I don't know, rent-a-cops or whatever that Cassian killed. Cassian, I think, saw him once as he escaped the planet with Luthen the first time. But that's it. It's like not like he ever knew who he was. Hi, I'm Cyril Karn. I'm here to arrest you. No, just okay. Yeah, did not know. It's not part of his thing. And he's off. So when they run into each other, Andor, fights back because that's what he does, but he has no idea who this sort of dorky dude who's just gone feral at him. He just has no idea who this dude is. And it kind of goes to, there's the comments in season 1 that the axe forgets, but the tree remembers. Cyril felt wronged, right? He felt, in this case, he was the tree, and Andor was the axe. Yeah. Okay. Not entirely perfect analogy in this case, but yeah. But as you go through, we get a scene later. I think it may have been at the end of that second arc where Bix gets her revenge on the Imperial torturer, the dude who subjected her to a horrific psychic torture thing in season 1. Oh yeah, he has no clue who she is. Right? The axe forgets, but the tree who got cut down, yeah, she remembered. That was awesome to see. Okay. So yeah, it was awesome. And as you go into then the third episode of that third arc, the Gorman Massacre arc, which is Mothma in the Senate. Mothma and Bail Organa and all of that stuff, and she gives her speech and lots of intrigue, but Luthen sends Cassian in to get her out because Bail's team, who was going to get her out, has been compromised. Okay, great. Now, you end up with Cassian Andor and Mon Mothma trying to escape the Senate, right? Turns out we know they're going to live. We know they're going to make it. They're in Rogue One. Mon Mothma's in Return of the Jedi, and all this other storytelling. We know they're going to survive. I never felt a lack of suspense and tension as they're trying to escape. It was so good. I know they're going to get out. I know it because this is a prequel. We know the future here. But dang, that was good. And seeing Mothma's horror at having to see and experience the violence of rebellion firsthand was fascinating. Okay, because here she is. She's the money person, right? She's been funneling money from her own fortune and from potentially other places into the rebellion. Okay, and under Luthen's direction at first, and maybe some more of her stuff later. But she hasn't been there on the ground with the fighting. So here Cassian shows up. He ends up gunning down an ISB agent in right there outside the Senate, and Mothma was just kind of shocked. And then as they're leaving, and here comes Mothma's driver, who we've known as an ISB agent since season 1. And he comes up to her, and Cassian's like, "Oh, maybe he'll help us." He says, "No, he's an ISB agent." Says, calls his name, and he starts coming over, just guns him down. And the look, somebody posted a meme of this in the LDS Gamers chat the other day. There's a shot, and I need to find this. I've got to. This would be wonderful, but it's Mothma, mouth wide open, agape in horror at watching her driver get shot, and Cassian's got this sort of smile as he does it. And it's just I think the meme was something like me watching Andor and me talking about Andor, right? As the horror and the joy, right? But it's like, whoa, it was fun. But yeah, her horror at seeing this is what rebellion is, right? And he tells her that after he guns down that ISB agent. She drops her blue senatorial robes and puts on his coat to help disguise herself. And his comments, welcome to the rebellion. Like, yeah, okay, this is what it's like. And whew, man, that whole arc, that third arc is amazing. The fourth arc, it's a little bit, it's not as intense, okay? The fourth arc it focuses on Luthen. And it opens with Dedra walking into Luthen's shop. They're making small talk and everything's happy and stuff. And they know each other. They know who these people are. Luthen obviously knows who Dedra is. And turns out, we find out through the conversation, Dedra knows who Luthen is. And she's there to arrest him. And does. Now, he had just found out that he'd been compromised, that they know who he is. And he had just found out about the Death Star. And he killed his informant, which is lovely. But so he destroys his equipment. He passes the information on to Clea, gets her out. So she's got the information and is on the run. He's destroying the equipment and gets arrested. Okay. I've kind of known that at some point Luthen was either going to get caught or killed or both, because it just seemed like that's the way his arc was going to go. And it's interesting, and I should have said this up top. This is going to be a long episode, and I apologize for that, but there's just so much, and I got to talk about all of it. Luthen and Clea has been sort of okay, obviously it's not a one-man show when it's two people and they're playing a bunch of other people, but or maybe puppet mastering bunch of other people, but it's basically been sort of a one-man show, their little thing. And what we see as the series progresses is they kind of get sidelined. The Rebel Alliance forms up, they're getting more organization, they're becoming their own thing. And you could tell, they talk about some of the other conversations in that episode on Yavin with the Alliance, that no one's particularly happy with Luthen. So he's sort of getting pushed to the side. And really what you're seeing is the rebellion is outgrowing him. Okay? And he laments in, maybe it was that second arc, that there's just too much information and they can't keep up. Yeah, that's exactly right. They needed to expand. That's what the rebellion, the Rebel Alliance is that expansion. And Luthen isn't part of it directly anymore. And I don't think, they make the point, actually Cassian makes the point, when he's dressing down some of the leaders of the Alliance, including, which I thought was great to see, Admiral Raddus. Oh, it's great to see him back. Hey, welcome. Look, it's Star Wars. Woohoo. Look, giant fish people. Yay, fish people. Gotta love the calamari, right? Mon calamari. Just calamari is apparently delicious to people. Anyway, they all talk about Luthen like he's some nutball and not worth listening to. And Andor's like, we wouldn't be here if it weren't for him. So yeah, that whole arc, yeah, he gets caught. He tries to suicide before he can be taken in and questioned. But the Empire is right there. They get him to a hospital where they're going to probably be able to save him, because medicine in Star Wars is actually pretty good. As long as you're not losing limbs, and even if you are, they can replace them. Say, they're pretty good with the whole medical tech out there. And Clea goes in and makes sure he dies. She sabotages the medical equipment so that he dies. But throughout that arc, we actually get to see why Clea is so fiercely loyal to Luthen. And man, you could feel her pain when she sabotages the machine so that he'll die. You know, and at that point, she gets out and she has lost all her cool. Her rock is gone. And I've been there. When my dad died, he was my foundation. He was my rock. He was my support in everything I did. Even though, you know, we lived 4 hours apart, knowing he was there, right, was my foundation and helped keep me stable. Hers just got killed, and she was the one who did it. So, yeah, when Cassian comes to rescue her, against orders, 17 or 18 of them, depending on the count after, according to K2SO. Yeah, that was also a very interesting and very fun, a fun arc. That whole rescue sequence with Cassian and, I forgot the guy's name who you see in Rogue One, Melshi. There we go. You see him in Rogue One. You see him he's one of the prisoners with Andor in Arcana 5, I think it is, in that One Way Out arc, right? So they go in to rescue. At first they think it's going to be Luthen. Turns out it's Clea. Okay, cool. And K2SO coming in and just wrecking shop. And it's fun. It is a fun, it's intense, but it never feels depressing, I guess. There's hope in it, which again, that's Star Wars. Rebellions are built on hope. We've heard that again this season. Star Wars is built on hope. Okay, it's one of my complaints about some of season 1 of Andor is you don't feel that hope very much. It is throughout this series. This whole season is, you feel the hope. And it was great. And so seeing that rescue happen, seeing Cassian who kept trying to leave, kept trying to get out of the game, and keeps coming back because he found something he believed in. And I think this is something that suffered because we didn't get that extra storytelling. Cassian keeps trying to get out. He rescues Mothma and tells Luthen, "This is the last time. I'm not doing this anymore." But when we come back in the beginning of the 4th arc, it's a year later, he's still working for the rebellion. He's a captain. He's there, right? They're ready to promote him, we're told. And that when he goes and steals his ship to go and rescue Clea, he's back in. We miss all of that. How did he get from I'm out of this to no, I'm full in with the rebellion? We don't get that storytelling because of the way the story is told. And we actually get that a little bit with Cyril as well. Because you see him in the first couple of arcs, and he is working with the Gorman, again, spying on behalf of the ISB. And his girlfriend, Dedra Miro. That's a relationship. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But you see him get trusted. Everyone likes him. Looks like the one girl there is hitting on him, right? It's working great. You start the 3rd arc, and they all hate him. And it's like, what happened? Something happened in that year, and we have no clue, right? And it felt like a little bit of whiplash coming into that 3rd arc. And I could feel the missing parts of the story there. So, yeah, that's just, I missed that part. But let's talk about Dedra and Cyril, okay? Cyril rescues Dedra, in the first season. And apparently that was enough for them to actually become a couple, to start dating. They're living together. And watching Dedra put Cyril's mom in her place was fun. It was interesting, right? Because Cyril's mom, you understand everything that's wrong with Cyril from Cyril's mom. And Cyril steps out because he just can't take it anymore. We get the lovely, sad Cyril meme of him just collapsed on the bed. But Dedra lays down the rules. She says, here's the plan. And by plan, I don't want you to think that any of this is optional. And then she lays down the rules. It's like, okay, I'll be sure he calls you and he visits, but the amount of interaction that you get will depend on how much anxiety you cause. And it's like, Uncle Harlow, who you keep talking about, I pulled up his ISB files. You don't want me to pull that thread. It's like, okay. Dedra is not playing around. And that was great to see. But my take on it, I think it's a little different from what I've heard some of the other comments on it was, I think Dedra actually found a personal connection. I think she actually felt whatever version of love she has in her, she felt that for Cyril. And I don't know how, I think Cyril returned it, but it got, when he realized what he had done and what he had helped the Empire do on Gorman, it completely overwhelmed any positive feelings he had. And despite, choking Dedra, she wanted him back. Now, okay, some people are into that sort of thing, but no, I think she had actually found something. Okay. And that, watching their relationship and watching, honestly, Cyril's confidence grow, and he's in an environment of people who love and support him. Now, is it slightly warped because the support is coming from the Empire and the ISB? Perhaps. On the other hand, they supported him. I think Dedra did love him. I think he loved her. I think he'd become obsessed with her initially, right? Because she was everything he wanted to be. And so I think he was more the case of, I have my obsession. But I think she truly did love him. And that love and that support and all of that helped him become a better person. Again, what he ended up doing wasn't great. But you can kind of see that what he could have been if he had had that support. And he certainly wasn't getting it from his mom. And he wasn't getting it from the corporate sector where he was a rent-a-cop trying to do his job. Right? You could see what might have been. Now, Dedra, she's on the outs because of the way everything went down on Ferrex, okay? But she got handpicked to lead this thing on Gorman, which Partagast, who's leading the ISB, tells her this is going to look like a demotion, but she's leading this operation, and she runs it, and she runs it well. And it does everything that the Empire wants. Okay. And then, in the fourth arc, she lets her personal obsession take a hold of her. And they drop a little bit through exposition of how she's let this take over her life, this hunt for Luthen. Okay. Axis, I think she calls him. Is that oh, she had files that she wasn't supposed to see show up in her mailbox, and she didn't delete them, she didn't report them, she read them. And because of that, what's the dude's name? Young? Something like that. Luthen's agent in the ISB, because he had access to Dedra's codes, stole her codes, he was able to read them, and that's how the information got to Luthen. But she had all this information on the Death Star. Turns out it's not great for her. She went to capture access without orders and against instructions, apparently, because she had to be the one to catch him. And he ends up dead. Great. The Death Star plan, the existence of the Death Star is out. This is not good for her. It's because of her reactions. She basically loses everything. She loses her career. She loses a relationship. She loses her freedom. She ends up in a prison. I think the Star Wars episode guide calls it, this is Narkina too. The same prison the Cassian ended up in, or the same prison complex. That's where she's at. She gets to deal with the calls of on program every morning, right? And the shock floors and all of that stuff, right? She loses it all. Partagast eats his blaster. Yeah. Oh, yeah. When he realizes, when everything comes down, because he was leading this all of everything. And so, oh, yeah, Orson Krennic and everybody's waiting for you. He says, okay, give me a minute to compose myself. And yes, of course, the guy steps out, door closes. You know, we get Partagast, he's setting his blaster on the table. And then when you're outside with the guards and you hear the blaster go off, it's like, yep, he knew what was coming, and he just, he took that way out. Right? And that's what the Empire does to people. The Empire destroys people. And we see it. We totally see it. And that's part of the reason the rebellion has to happen. Because the Empire sucks in every possible way, okay? Now, in all the lead up to season 2, there's going to be all this talk about how this was going to reframe Rogue One. And it does, in a couple of interesting ways. Orson Krennic shows up through a couple of these arcs. Excuse me. So Krennic shows up. And, you know, I always felt him almost like a bureaucratic fool in Rogue One. He's in charge of the project, but it's like a bureaucrat who's got a little bit of power and is flaunting it a little bit because he can, but is always afraid it's going to just crumble away from him. Okay. Which it does, right? You see him, Tarkin takes the project from him when it's successful, and you see him, he gets called to talk to Vader, and Vader drops force chokes and dad jokes. You know, Anakin's a father. Dad jokes are just part of what's, you know, it's Vader is strong in the power of the Force and the power of the dad joke. Okay. It's just, some people have skills, and those are Vader's. But yeah, Krennic just never feels like he's anyone to be really feared so much. But in Andor, the dude is terrifying. You can see this guy, he has his authority, and he earned it. And he plays everything, and he plays it well. So when you get into Rogue One and it's all falling apart, you realize, was the line from the Phantom Menace, there's always a bigger fish? Yeah. He was the biggest fish. And then Tarkin's the bigger fish. And right? And he gets eaten by Tarkin. Yeah, it's that part of Rogue One really changed for me because of what happens in Andor. It is really worth it seeing all the fun stuff here. It's like, yep. Watch what they do with Krennic, because they really make him a force to be reckoned with. That that I felt like was not there in Rogue One. Now, that said, I watched Rogue One after I watched the last arc of Andor, or the end of the season. So I watched the season on Tuesday. Wednesday, I had some time, so I watched Rogue One. And that was a bit of a letdown. Of course, different director. Tony Gilroy did come in later to do some punch-ups, but different director. But you do kind of feel a little bit of what Cassian talks about, why he's willing to gun down, is it Tevik there at the beginning? And you can understand why he talks about, we've all done horrible things in the name of the rebellion. And you can kind of see that, right? It does. I don't feel, it's not as intense. I don't think it's quite, the storytelling is quite as good. I loved Rogue One. I thought it was a good movie. It is probably the weakest episode in Andor season 2. If you want to think of it in that framework, yeah, Rogue One is the weakest part of the season 2 storyline, going from beginning of season 2 through Rogue One. But you definitely get a different feel for Cassian, for Orson Krennic, and how we got here, which was great to see. All right, couple of other things. I already talked about how season 2 of Andor felt like, hey, we actually are Star Wars again, right? You get aliens everywhere, which it was pretty much an all-human show in season 1. They remembered that the Force exists, right? It's not like you see a Jedi or something, but there's a Force healer, somebody who is strong in the Force. She's a Force healer. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. She's not trained. She doesn't know quite, maybe she's not like even Jedi level, but it's there. They talk about it. They reference it. There is more fun. There are jokes. There's like K2SO. I wanted to see even more of him, because Alan Tudyk's portrayal of K2SO was great in Rogue One, and it is fabulous here. Okay, now I think there's a weird continuity issue. Okay, during the Gorban massacre, the Empire unleashes a bunch of KX droids, including the droid that becomes K2SO. And those things are nearly indestructible. Cassian unloads with his rifle, and they just bounce off it, doing absolutely nothing to this droid. But in Rogue One, on Jeddah, when Cassian and Jyn are trying to get to Saw, and end up right in the middle of a bombing by Saw's partisans, Jyn one-shots a KX droid. And at K2SO's final stands at the end of the movie, oh yeah, he could take a lot of punishment, but it's not like blaster bolts are just bouncing off him like they do in Andor during the Gorban massacre. So it's like, okay, yeah, all right, whatever. Still fun. Still loved K2SO. He was such a great it was a great addition to this. But I understand why he wasn't there longer. I wanted to see more of him. But K2SO is not a spy, right? There's no way he's too noticeable, right? He's just a big hulking droid. You can't miss him, right? He's not sneaking into places. And for a series that up until the 4th arc has all been about spy games and stuff, K2SO just doesn't quite fit. But man, it was great to have him here while he was there. So loved it. What the opening scene of the 4th arc, where Kay and Cassian and Melshi are playing cards, or actually it's like some form of space dominoes. It's just it was fun. It was really fun. All right. A couple of other things. Bix, it was great to see her get her. It was great to see Bix get her revenge. And I'm glad she lived. She ended up, I guess she had Cassian's baby. So good for her. But she ended up kind of getting sidelined. You know, I'm glad they didn't do the Bix died and that's what motivated Cassian, okay? They didn't need to fridge Bix. And I'm glad to see that. And I honestly, I don't know if... I mean, they made a big buildup. I think it was the end of the second arc that she got her revenge and she's fixed and she's ready to go to work. But she never does. After that, she's always home doing other things. So I don't know. She kind of got sidelined, and I think that's one of the things we could have seen more of if we'd had more of the story to tell. Saw Gerrera was fun. So we've seen Saw in the Clone Wars and in Star Wars Rebels. And he was a different character in a lot of ways than what you see in Rogue One. But we see that transition of how he becomes this just paranoid, delusioned nutball. And yeah, turns out the dude's huffing fumes, and turns out Luthen gave him reasons to be paranoid. But we see that transition as it goes through the couple of times we see him in season 2 of Andor. And so he makes a lot more sense in Rogue One than he did prior to Andor, which is great. So yeah, that was good to see. So I already talked about, said I think there was, because they went from what was hoping to be a 4-season show to 1 season with 3-episode arcs, basically 4 movies, you know, we lost a lot of context, and I think that's a good thing. All right. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the politics in Andor. I am not going to get deep into this here, okay? I acknowledge there's a lot of politics in Andor, there's a lot of politics in Star Wars. I am not going to talk about that here, okay? I may do a bonus episode where I dive into that. I haven't fully decided on that. I've had a zero politics or a very light politics rule on the Music Free Network. But I acknowledge there's a lot of politics here. And Star Wars has always been political, okay? I will say one of the things I love about Star Wars is the rebellion against tyranny. And it doesn't matter where the tyranny comes from, okay? Doesn't matter if it's tyranny coming from the right or from the left or from the top or from the bottom or wherever. Tyranny must be opposed. That is a message, I think, is a universal message in Star Wars. And I think applying that to, well, obviously they're talking about this particular political party or whatever. I think that message, while maybe jiving a little bit with George Lucas himself, I think that message misses the point. And the point is, we must fight tyranny. And we see that so much in Star Wars. And I love that aspect of it. And all in all, Andor Season 2 is one that I will rewatch. Andor Season 1, maybe not so much. But Season 2 was amazing. Was it perfect? No. I think, again, some of the failures of the structure are there. But dang, this was a good show. Absolutely recommend it. And let me know what you think. Drop a comment here on Spotify or on YouTube, or join the Discord. We can talk there. Join the movies channel in my Discord. We'll talk about it. But until next time, be excellent to each other. And this is Music Free Gaming. Or actually, no. This is Music Free Static, because I will get that wrong often enough. But this is Music Free Static, signing off.